My name is Eleanor Bailey, and at 29 years old, I never expected to be abandoned by my family when I needed them most. After my car crash left both my legs shattered, my parents decided that taking my sister Lily to New Zealand was more important than helping me recover. Their parting words still echo in my mind. "Don't call us while we're happy here." So I didn't. 3 days later, something happened that changed everything. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and if you've ever felt abandoned by family, hit subscribe to join our community of survivors who've become thrivers. Life before the accident was pretty great. I had just secured a promotion at the marketing firm in Chicago, where I'd been working for 5 years. My career was on an upward trajectory, and I was finally seeing the fruits of my labor. My corner office overlooked the Chicago skyline, and my team respected me. I had worked hard to get there, often staying late and picking up projects others avoided. That dedication had paid off with a substantial salary increase and more decision-making power. My younger sister Lily had just graduated college with a degree in communications. At 22, she had always been the free spirit of the family, changing majors twice before settling on something she enjoyed. Unlike me, Lily never worried too much about the future. She lived in the moment, took spontaneous trips with friends, and somehow still managed to graduate with decent grades. Our parents never seemed concerned about her carefree approach to life. Mom and Dad had always shown subtle favoritism toward Lily. Nothing extreme or obvious enough to complain about, just small things I noticed growing up. They attended all of Lily's soccer games but missed half of my debate competitions. They proudly displayed her artwork on the refrigerator while my academic awards gathered dust in a drawer. When I pointed this out once as a teenager, Mom dismissed it with, "Lily just needs more encouragement than you do, Eleanor. You've always been so independent." My independence wasn't innate. It was learned from necessity. From an early age, I understood that to get attention in our family, I needed to achieve. So I became the responsible one, the planner, the achiever. I managed my own college applications, worked part-time jobs to supplement my scholarship, and never asked for financial help. Lily, meanwhile, had her college fully funded by our parents and received a monthly allowance. Despite this imbalance, we maintained a decent relationship as sisters. I genuinely loved Lily and was proud of her graduation. She had grown into a creative, kind-hearted woman, even if she still relied heavily on our parents. We talked weekly, sharing updates about our lives and occasionally meeting for lunch when her schedule allowed. My new position required more travel, which I was excited about. Chicago had been my home for years, but I looked forward to representing the company at conferences and meeting with clients in different cities. The promotion came with new business cards that read Senior Marketing Executive, a title I had worked towards since starting at the company. To celebrate both my promotion and Lily's graduation, our parents suggested a family vacation. We hadn't taken one together since I was in college, and the idea of spending quality time together appealed to me. They proposed New Zealand, somewhere they had always wanted to visit. The trip would be a week long, hiking through mountains and exploring the filming locations of movies we all loved. We spent an evening on a video call, looking at potential itineraries and accommodations. Mom and Dad seemed genuinely excited about having both their daughters along for this adventure. The last family dinner before the crash happened at my parents' suburban home, just outside Chicago. Mom prepared her famous pot roast, and Dad opened an expensive bottle of wine to toast our accomplishments. The conversation flowed easily, with Lily sharing funny stories from her final semester and me discussing my upcoming projects. Looking back, there were subtle signs I should have noticed. When I mentioned a major campaign I was leading, Mom nodded politely before quickly turning to Lily to ask about her job prospects. When Dad refilled our wine glasses, Lily's was filled to the brim while mine received just a splash more. When dessert came out, Lily got the larger slice of chocolate cake without anyone seeming to notice. These were small moments, insignificant on their own, but part of a pattern I had normalized throughout my life. As I drove home that night, I felt content. My career was thriving, my family was proud, and the future looked bright. I had an early meeting the next morning, so I needed to review some documents before bed. The traffic was light as I merged onto the highway, thinking about the presentation I would deliver to clients the following day. I couldn't have known then that my entire life was about to change direction as suddenly and violently as a car spinning out of control. The rain started as a light drizzle but quickly intensified as I drove home from that family dinner. The windshield wipers struggled to keep up with the downpour, and visibility diminished with each passing minute. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, leaning forward to better see the road ahead. Traffic had thinned out, but I maintained a cautious speed, aware of the slick conditions. I was about 15 minutes from my apartment when it happened. A deer bounded onto the highway directly in front of my car, its eyes reflecting my headlights. I instinctively swerved to avoid hitting the animal, but my tires lost traction on the wet pavement. The car hydroplaned, spinning across 2 lanes. I remember the surreal feeling of having no control, watching headlights approach from the opposite direction. The impact came from the driver's side as my car collided with the guardrail before being struck by an oncoming vehicle. The airbag deployed with explosive force, and time seemed to slow down. I heard the crunch of metal, felt the jolt of impact, and then everything went black. My next memory is fragmented, flashing lights, voices shouting instructions, the cold rain on my face as someone asked me to stay awake. I tried to move my legs but couldn't feel them, which sent a wave of panic through my body before unconsciousness claimed me again. I woke up in the hospital disoriented and in excruciating pain. The harsh fluorescent lights hurt my eyes, and the steady beeping of monitors created a soundtrack to my confusion. A nurse noticed I was awake and approached my bed, explaining that I had been in a serious accident and was in the recovery room following surgery. When I asked about my legs, her expression softened with sympathy. "Both your legs sustained multiple fractures," she explained gently. "The right femur was broken in 2 places, and your left leg has compound fractures of the tibia and fibula. The surgeons inserted rods and screws to stabilize the bones. You also have a mild concussion and some lacerations, but those are less serious." The gravity of my injuries slowly sank in. The doctor later explained that I would need several months of recovery, including physical therapy, before I could walk normally again. I would be temporarily confined to a wheelchair, followed by a gradual transition to walker and then crutches. The timeline he described stretched before me like an endless road. My first question after processing this information was, "Has my family been notified?" The nurse assured me they had been contacted immediately after my admission. Hours passed, however, before my parents and Lily arrived. When they finally appeared in the doorway of my hospital room, their expressions showed concern mixed with something else: inconvenience. "We were in the middle of finalizing details for New Zealand," Mom explained, as if that justified their delayed arrival. Dad awkwardly patted my hand while keeping a distance from the medical equipment. Lily seemed genuinely upset, her eyes red-rimmed as she asked how I was feeling. During that first visit, they stayed less than an hour. Mom kept checking her watch, and Dad mentioned traffic getting worse. Before leaving, Mom said, "We'll come back tomorrow with some things from your apartment. Is there anything specific you need?" Her tone suggested she hoped the list would be short. The next few days established a pattern. Their visits became shorter and less frequent. Mom would bring magazines or snacks, but spend most of the time on her phone. Dad often stepped out to take calls. Lily made more effort, sitting beside my bed and trying to distract me with gossip or funny videos, but even she seemed restless after a while. 5 days after the accident, I overheard a conversation outside my room that wasn't meant for my ears. My parents thought I was sleeping when Mom said, "We need to decide about New Zealand. The deposits are non-refundable, and we've been planning this for months." Dad's response made my heart sink. "I know. And honestly, the doctors said her recovery will take months. We can't put our lives on hold indefinitely. Lily deserves her graduation celebration," Mom added. "She's been looking forward to this trip." Their voices faded as they walked away, but the damage was done. I lay there, tears sliding silently into my hair, feeling like a burden rather than a daughter in crisis. When discharge planning began, the hospital social worker asked about my home situation and what support I would have during recovery. I automatically said my family would help because that's what families do, right? The social worker provided instructions on wound care, medication management, and mobility assistance that would need to be followed at home. She emphasized that I shouldn't be alone for at least the first couple of weeks. The day before my discharge, my parents arrived with Lily in tow. I expected them to discuss arrangements for my care, perhaps a schedule they had worked out. Instead, Mom sat primly on the edge of the visitor chair and cleared her throat. "Eleanor, we need to discuss the New Zealand trip," she began. "We've thought about it carefully, and we've decided to go ahead as planned." I stared at her in disbelief. "But I'll need help when I get home." The social worker said I shouldn't be alone. Dad jumped in. "We thought about that. We can help set you up before we leave, get you situated with everything within reach. You've always been so independent, Eleanor." "Life must go on," Mom added with a dismissive wave. "And Lily deserves her celebration. She only graduates college once." Lily looked uncomfortable, glancing between our parents and me. "Maybe we could postpone for a month or two," she suggested timidly. Mom shot her a look that immediately silenced her. "The tickets are booked, the accommodations paid for. Besides, Eleanor will be recovering for months. Should we cancel all our plans for the rest of the year?" The conversation continued, but I barely heard it through the roaring in my ears. My own parents were choosing a vacation over helping their injured daughter. As they outlined their plans, I realized they weren't asking for my understanding. They were informing me of a decision already made. Coming home to my empty apartment was a stark introduction to my new reality. The hospital wheelchair barely fit through my narrow bathroom door, and reaching the microwave on the counter became an exercise in pain management. My parents helped minimally with the setup, arranging a makeshift bedroom in the living room since my actual bedroom was up a short flight of stairs I couldn't navigate. Mom placed a few frozen meals in the freezer and bottled water within reach. Dad moved the coffee table closer to the couch and set up a tray with basic necessities. Lily helped more practically, placing my medications in a daily pill organizer and programming reminder alarms on my phone. Throughout these preparations, my parents continued discussing their upcoming trip as if it were the priority. "We should pack the hiking boots," Mom said to Dad while half-heartedly arranging my pillows. "The forecast shows perfect weather for the Milford Track." When I asked if one of them could stay just for the first few days to help me adjust, the response was immediate and harsh. "Eleanor, you're not a child," Mom said with surprising coldness. "We've already delayed our departure by 3 days because of your accident. The trip was planned months ago." "We've helped set everything up," Dad added, gesturing around the room. "You have your phone to call for delivery if you need anything. The doctor said you mainly need rest anyway." I tried explaining the practical challenges. How would I shower? How would I prepare food when I couldn't stand at the stove? What if I fell trying to transfer from the wheelchair? Their solutions were superficial. Use dry shampoo. Order takeout. Be careful. Then came the bombshell that made their previous statements seem compassionate by comparison. Dad cleared his throat awkwardly while Mom checked something on her phone. "We should mention," he began, not quite meeting my eyes, "we've extended the trip from 1 week to 1 month." The shock must have shown on my face because he quickly continued, "It made sense financially. Since we're going all that way, we might as well make the most of it. We found some great deals on accommodations for the extended stay." I looked to Lily, hoping for an ally, but she stared at the floor. "A month?" I repeated, my voice barely audible. "I'll be alone for a month?" "You won't be alone," Mom countered. "You have friends, coworkers. You can call people if you need help." "But I specifically asked if you could help, and you're leaving for a month." Mom's expression hardened. "We're not canceling this trip, Eleanor. Lily has been looking forward to it, and frankly, so have we." The conversation that followed revealed the true nature of my parents' feelings. As they continued justifying their decision, Mom finally said the words that would echo in my mind for months to come. "We're going to enjoy this trip," she said firmly. "Don't call us while we're happy there. We don't need to hear complaints or problems. We deserve this break, and we don't want it ruined with negativity." Dad nodded in agreement. You've always been able to handle things on your own. This is no different. You'll figure it out." Their departure the next morning was brief and businesslike. Mom reminded me about medication schedules, as if that absolved her of responsibility. Dad awkwardly patted my shoulder and mentioned something about bringing back souvenirs. Lily hugged me tightly, whispering, "I'm sorry," before following our parents out the door. The conflict on her face was evident, but not strong enough for her to take a stand. The sound of the door closing behind them was deafening in its finality. I sat in my wheelchair in the middle of my living room, surrounded by the meager accommodations they had arranged, and felt the full weight of abandonment crash over me. That first night alone was a nightmare of physical pain and emotional anguish. The medication schedule was complicated, requiring different pills at specific times. I dropped one on the floor and spent 20 minutes trying to retrieve it with a ruler because I couldn't bend down. When hunger finally overcame discomfort, I discovered I couldn't reach most of the food they had put away. I settled for crackers and a warm bottle of water. The bathroom presented challenges I hadn't fully anticipated. The transfer from wheelchair to toilet was excruciating, and I nearly fell twice. Washing my hands afterward required contortionist maneuvers. I gave up on the idea of a shower, realizing it would be impossible without assistance. Sleep came in short, restless bursts, interrupted by pain and the need to adjust position to prevent pressure sores. The doctor had emphasized the importance of movement, but each shift sent shards of pain through my legs. By morning, I was exhausted, disheveled, and demoralized. The financial reality of my situation quickly became apparent. Medical bills had already started arriving, with insurance covering only a portion. The ambulance ride alone cost hundreds of dollars. Physical therapy would require co-payments I hadn't budgeted for. Delivery services for food and necessities added up quickly. My savings, which had been earmarked for a down payment on a condo, would now be redirected to survival. I researched home health aides, but the out-of-pocket costs were prohibitive. Community services had waiting lists or required qualifications I didn't meet. Friends offered help, but most had jobs, families, and lives that prevented consistent assistance. I accepted what help I could get without becoming a burden, which meant long stretches of time alone, struggling with basic tasks. By the end of the first week, I had developed a system of sorts. I kept essentials within reach, used delivery apps for meals, and became adept at navigating small spaces in the wheelchair. But the physical toll was evident. My surgical wounds needed attention I couldn't properly provide. Sleep deprivation affected my cognitive function. The apartment, once my pride, became a prison of limitations and reminders of independence lost. Through it all, the words "Don't call us while we're happy" played on repeat in my mind, a mantra of rejection that colored every painful moment. By the beginning of the second week alone, my physical health had noticeably deteriorated. The surgical incisions on my right leg showed signs of possible infection, reddening at the edges and becoming increasingly painful to touch. I tried cleaning them as instructed, but the awkward angle made proper care impossible. My left leg remained immobilized in a heavy cast that grew more uncomfortable by the day, itching incessantly beneath where I couldn't reach. Sleep deprivation took its toll, leaving me foggy and irritable. Basic hygiene became a luxury rather than a routine. I managed sponge baths using the sink when I could summon the energy, but my hair remained unwashed, and the simple act of brushing my teeth required strategic planning. The apartment began to reflect my declining state. Dishes piled up, trash accumulated, and dust gathered on surfaces beyond my reach. A follow-up appointment with the orthopedic surgeon had been scheduled for that Wednesday, 10 days after my discharge. I had it marked on my calendar in red, anticipating the doctor's assessment of my healing progress. The morning of the appointment, I called 3 different rideshare services, all of which declined when I explained I would need assistance with a wheelchair. Taxi companies quoted exorbitant rates for their accessible vehicles. Public transportation was out of the question given my limited mobility. After exhausting all options, I called the doctor's office to reschedule, only to be informed that the next available appointment was 3 weeks away. The receptionist's voice held concern when I explained my transportation issues, but there was little she could do beyond recommending I find someone to drive me. Missing this appointment isn't advisable, she warned. The doctor needs to check your surgical sites and adjust your treatment plan, if necessary. I hung up feeling a new level of desperation. My medical care, something I had taken for granted, was now dependent on factors beyond my control. That same afternoon, I received a call from Margaret, the HR director at my company. Her tone was professionally sympathetic, but tinged with concern. "Eleanor, we've been trying to get an update on your condition," she began. "Your medical leave paperwork indicated a potential return date of next month for remote work, but we haven't received any progress reports from your doctor." I explained the missed appointment, trying to keep my voice steady despite the rising panic. "I understand these circumstances are challenging," Margaret continued, "but I need to make you aware that extended absences without proper medical documentation could affect your position. We have projects that can't remain on hold indefinitely." The implication was clear. My job, the career I had built so carefully, was now at risk. After assuring Margaret I would send the necessary documentation as soon as possible, I sat in stunned silence, staring at the phone. The financial stability that had allowed me to live independently was threatening to crumble beneath me. Social isolation compounded my deteriorating situation. Initially, a few friends had checked in via text or brief visits, but as days passed, these connections dwindled. Everyone had their own busy lives, and my constant needs became an unspoken burden. I found myself hesitating to reach out, not wanting to be the friend who only called when they needed something. My sister Lily had texted a few times in the first days after their departure, sending scenic photos of New Zealand with captions like, "Wish you were here." The messages felt tone-deaf given my circumstances, and eventually, I stopped responding. When I tried calling her directly during a particularly difficult night, the call went straight to voicemail. I later received a text explaining they were in a remote area with limited service. Curiosity and masochism led me to check my parents' social media accounts. Their profiles had become highlight reels of their extended vacation. Photos showed them hiking through lush forests, dining at waterfront restaurants, and posing with Lily at tourist attractions. They appeared carefree and joyful, their smiles wide and genuine in a way I rarely saw at home. One photo caption pierced through my already fragile emotional state. "Best family vacation ever. Just the three of us." The casual exclusion, presented so publicly, confirmed what I had long suspected, but never wanted to acknowledge. In their minds, the ideal family unit didn't include me. The combination of physical pain, isolation, and this public rejection triggered a complete emotional breakdown. I sobbed until I was gasping for breath, the kind of crying that leaves you hollow and exhausted. The walls of the apartment seemed to close in, emphasizing my confinement. The wheelchair, symbol of my temporary limitation, began to feel like a permanent sentence. That night, I reached my lowest point. Struggling to reach my medication on a shelf that had gradually moved out of easy reach, I knocked the bottle to the floor, pills scattering across the hardwood. The simple act of retrieving them was impossible from my seated position. I stared at the white tablets, each one representing relief just beyond my grasp, and felt something inside me break. For several hours, I sat motionless in the darkness, contemplating the effort it would take to continue this daily struggle. Recovery seemed an impossible mountain, and I had been left to climb it alone. What was the point of fighting so hard just to reach a baseline of independence? Who would even notice if I stopped trying? These dark thoughts circled like vultures, feeding on my diminishing hope. I didn't eat that evening. I didn't take my medication. I didn't answer texts from concerned coworkers. I simply sat, watching shadows lengthen across the wall, wondering if this was what giving up felt like. 3 days after my family's departure for New Zealand, exactly when my emotional and physical state had reached its nadir, an unexpected knock at the door pulled me from my fog of despair. I hesitated, considering ignoring it, but the knocking persisted, followed by a familiar voice. "Eleanor? It's Rebecca from work. Are you home?" I wheeled myself to the door, conscious of my unkempt appearance, but too exhausted to care. Rebecca Gardner stood in the hallway, a canvas tote bag slung over her shoulder and concern etched across her face. We weren't particularly close colleagues, having worked together on only a few projects, which made her presence all the more surprising. "Sorry to drop by unannounced," she said, taking in my disheveled state and the disarray visible behind me. "We've been worried since no one's heard from you for a few days." The simple acknowledgement that someone had noticed my absence was enough to bring tears to my eyes. Rebecca's professional demeanor quickly gave way to practical compassion as she took in the state of the apartment and my obvious struggle. "May I come in?" she asked gently. Without waiting for a response, she stepped inside and set down her bag. "I brought some groceries. I thought you might need supplies." What followed was a flurry of quiet, efficient activity. Rebecca moved through the apartment, tidying as she went, asking practical questions about my medication schedule and basic needs. She gathered scattered pills, organized them back into the proper containers, and placed them within easy reach. She washed dishes that had piled in the sink, cleared expired food from the refrigerator, and prepared a simple meal of scrambled eggs and toast. The smell of fresh food cooking stirred something in me I hadn't realized was dormant. As I watched this woman, essentially a work acquaintance, handle tasks my own family had deemed too burdensome, something shifted in my perspective. "I don't understand," I said as she placed a plate before me. "Why are you doing this?" Rebecca paused, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "The team was concerned when you missed our weekly video check-in. Your emails stopped being detailed, which isn't like you. We tried calling but kept getting voicemail." She looked around the apartment. "Where's your family? I thought they would be helping during your recovery." The question was asked without judgment, but it broke the dam I had built around my emotions. Through halting sentences interrupted by tears, I explained my parents' decision to continue with their vacation, their extended stay, and their parting words about not calling while they were happy. Rebecca's expression shifted from shock to indignation on my behalf. "That's not okay, Eleanor. Not by any standard." The validation of my feelings, so simple yet so profound, cracked open a space for healing I hadn't known I needed. Rebecca stayed for hours, helping me shower for the first time in days, washing my hair, and changing into clean clothes. The physical relief was immediate, but the emotional impact of being cared for was transformative. Before leaving, Rebecca made a phone call I would later recognize as the catalyst for my recovery. She contacted Janet Wilson, our team supervisor, explaining my situation in frank terms. By the time she hung up, a plan was forming that would change everything. "The team is organizing a rotation schedule," Rebecca explained. "Different people will check in each day, help with whatever you need. Janet's partner is a nurse who can look at those incisions tomorrow. And we're setting up remote work options so you can stay connected without worrying about your position." I protested weakly, embarrassed by the need for such accommodation, but Rebecca was firm. "This isn't charity, Eleanor. This is community. Any one of us could be in your position. Let people help." After she left, promising to return the next day with Janet and her partner, I sat in the clean apartment, with a full stomach and washed hair, feeling the first stirrings of hope since the accident. Rebecca had brought more than groceries. She had delivered perspective. The following morning, Janet arrived with her partner Michael, who examined my surgical incisions with professional concern. He cleaned and redressed the wounds, explaining that while there was minor inflammation, it hadn't progressed to infection. He made a list of supplies I would need and instructed Janet on proper wound care techniques. Janet, meanwhile, helped me call the doctor's office to explain the transportation issue. Unlike my previous attempt, this time Janet refused to accept the distant rescheduled date. "This is a patient who recently had major surgery and has mobility issues," she stated firmly. "She needs to be seen this week, and we need help arranging medical transport." Her advocacy produced results I couldn't achieve alone. The receptionist connected us with a social worker who arranged medical transportation for an appointment that Friday. The social worker also provided information about community resources I hadn't known existed, meal delivery programs for temporarily disabled individuals, volunteer organizations that provided companionship and basic assistance, and support groups for accident survivors. By the end of that day, I had a refrigerator full of prepared meals, a schedule of visitors for the coming week, and transportation arranged for my medical appointment. More importantly, I had a renewed sense that recovery was possible, not as a solitary uphill battle, but as a journey supported by unexpected allies. The realization that true family isn't always defined by blood relations came gradually over those days. Each coworker who stopped by brought something different. Thomas from accounting helped organize my medical bills and set up payment plans. Stephanie from creative brought her laptop and helped me catch up on industry news. Even Marcus, the quiet intern, arrived with homemade soup his grandmother had prepared when she heard about my situation. One evening, as I scrolled through my phone out of habit, I found myself opening my parents' social media pages. Their latest posts showed them wine tasting at a New Zealand vineyard, all smiles with their arms around Lily. For the first time, instead of feeling the stab of exclusion, I felt a strange detachment. I closed the app and deleted it from my phone, a small act of liberation that felt enormous in its significance. I don't need to watch people be happy about leaving me behind, I told Rebecca when she visited the next day. I'm focusing on the people who choose to be here. She smiled, understanding the milestone this represented. That's the first step to taking back control, she said. Choose where you put your energy. That decision became my guiding principle in the days that followed. I chose to put energy into my recovery, into strengthening new relationships, into rebuilding my life on terms I defined. The road ahead remained long and challenging, but for the first time since the crash, I was no longer traveling it alone. With support from my coworkers firmly established, I developed a new daily routine that accommodated my physical limitations while allowing for progress. Mornings began with medication and gentle stretching exercises recommended by my physical therapist. Midday included a few hours of remote work, keeping my mind engaged and maintaining my professional connections. Evenings often brought visitors who helped with dinner and provided much-needed social interaction. The medical transport arranged by Janet took me to my rescheduled appointment, where the doctor expressed concern about the care of my surgical sites, but was pleased that infection had been avoided. He adjusted my treatment plan and emphasized the importance of physical therapy, which would begin the following week. Through the community resources the social worker had connected me with, I met Jessica Torres, a home health aide who agreed to visit 3 times weekly. Insurance covered part of her services, and my company's disability benefits helped with the remainder. Jessica became more than a medical assistant. She became a friend and advocate who understood the challenges of recovery. You're doing better than many patients with similar injuries, she observed during her second visit. You have grit, Eleanor. That's something no one can give you. Physical therapy sessions began in my apartment with Amy Chun, a therapist who specialized in post-surgical rehabilitation. The exercises were painful and progress frustratingly slow, but Amy's patient encouragement kept me motivated. Each small achievement, extending my leg a few degrees further, bearing weight for a few seconds longer, became cause for celebration. Recovery isn't linear, Amy reminded me when frustration threatened to overwhelm. Some days you'll take 2 steps forward, other days 1 step back. The important thing is to keep moving. Through Jessica, I learned about a support group for accident survivors that met virtually. Initially hesitant, I joined a session and found unexpected comfort in shared experiences. These strangers understood aspects of my recovery that even well-meaning friends couldn't grasp: the phantom pains that woke me at night, the psychological toll of sudden dependence, the grief for an independence temporarily lost. Diana Moore, a group member who had experienced a similar accident the previous year, became a valuable mentor. The hardest lesson for me, she shared, was learning to ask for help without shame. Independence isn't about doing everything alone. It's about having the wisdom to know when to reach out. Her words resonated deeply, challenging my lifelong belief that needing help signified weakness. I began practicing the uncomfortable art of direct requests, asking coworkers to pick up prescriptions, requesting specific foods when people offered to bring meals, admitting when pain made work impossible. Each honest acknowledgement of needs strengthened rather than diminished me. About 3 weeks into my recovery, I received an unexpected message from my mother's sister, Aunt Barbara. We had limited contact over the years as she and my mother had a strained relationship I never fully understood. Her message was simple. I heard about your accident from a mutual friend. Your mother hasn't mentioned it. Are you getting the support you need? Our subsequent phone conversation revealed family dynamics I had sensed, but never confirmed. Barbara explained that my parents had a long history of self-centered behavior, which had caused rifts throughout the extended family. Your mother has always been this way, Barbara said, her voice tinged with old hurt. When our father was ill, she took a vacation instead of helping with his care. She claimed she needed self-care and couldn't handle the negativity of illness. The pattern Barbara described aligned perfectly with my current experience, providing context that was both painful and oddly validating. I wasn't singled out for abandonment. This was consistent behavior reflecting their limitations, not my worth. Barbara lived in Seattle, too far to provide physical assistance, but she began calling regularly and sending care packages with thoughtful items, compression socks that made wheelchair sitting more comfortable, a reaching tool that expanded my independence, books to pass the time. Her support, though distant, helped heal wounds deeper than my physical injuries. Financial planning became another focus of my recovery period. The medical bills continued to arrive with alarming regularity, and my emergency fund was dwindling despite insurance coverage. Thomas from accounting proved invaluable, helping me negotiate payment plans and identify expenses I could temporarily eliminate. The down payment fund for my future condo was partially repurposed, a difficult but necessary decision. Think of it as investing in your health rather than property, Thomas advised. You can rebuild savings once you're back at full capacity. 5 weeks after the accident, I was cleared to begin working remotely part-time. The familiar professional challenges provided welcome distraction from physical discomfort and a sense of purpose that accelerated healing. My team accommodated my situation with flexibility, scheduling meetings during my stronger hours and adjusting deadlines when necessary. The first time I contributed meaningfully to a project discussion, offering insights that helped solve a client's problem, I felt a surge of confidence that had nothing to do with physical capability. My professional identity, temporarily overshadowed by patient status, reasserted itself with reassuring strength. 6 weeks post-accident marked a significant milestone, my first outing beyond medical appointments. Rebecca and Jessica helped me navigate the logistics of dining at a restaurant with mobility limitations. The simple pleasure of sitting in a public space, ordering from a menu, and participating in normal social activity felt like an extraordinary achievement. As we waited for dessert, Rebecca raised her glass in a toast. To Eleanor, who's stronger than anyone I know. The moment was interrupted by my phone vibrating with an incoming call. The screen displayed Lily's name, the first direct contact since a brief text 3 weeks earlier. I hesitated, then excused myself to answer. Eleanor. Lily's voice sounded small and far away. Can you talk? I learned she had sneaked away from our parents to make the call, using the hotel's Wi-Fi rather than her cell service, so they wouldn't see the call on their shared family plan. She spoke in hushed tones, explaining that our parents had forbidden contact with me during their trip. They said you would just complain and ruin our experience, she admitted, her voice breaking. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't stand up to them. I'm so sorry, Eleanor. The apology was sincere but insufficient given the magnitude of the abandonment. I acknowledged her regret, without offering easy absolution. I appreciate you calling, Lily, I said carefully. But I'm not ready to pretend everything is okay. What happened hurt me deeply, and I'm still processing that. I understand, she whispered. I just needed you to know I've been thinking about you. And I'm realizing some things about Mom and Dad that I never saw before. The conversation ended with her promise to call again, when she could do so safely. While I couldn't fully forgive her participation in my abandonment, I recognized her small act of rebellion as a potential first step toward change in our relationship. By the 8th week, I progressed from wheelchair to walker for short distances around the apartment. Each painful, wobbly step represented victory over circumstances that had once seemed insurmountable. Jessica documented these milestones with photos that tracked my physical transformation, not just the increasing mobility, but the return of color to my face, the straightening of my posture, the light rekindling in my eyes. My apartment, once a prison of limitations, gradually transformed into a gathering place for the community that had formed around my recovery. Friday evening became an informal social occasion, with various supporters stopping by with food, games, or simply conversation. These gatherings, initially centered around my needs, evolved into genuine friendships independent of my condition. The contrast between my chosen family and biological one grew starker with each passing day. My parents' occasional texts from New Zealand remained superficial, focusing on their experiences without meaningful inquiries about my recovery. I responded politely but briefly, maintaining minimal contact without emotional investment. 10 weeks after the accident, my team organized a surprise celebration of my recovery milestones. They transformed our regular Friday gathering into a party complete with decorations, my favorite foods, and a cake inscribed with Eleanor the Indomitable. The gesture, so thoughtful and affirming, highlighted how much genuine care I had found among people who had once been merely colleagues. As I looked around the room at these individuals who had stepped up when my family stepped away, I realized I had gained something precious through my loss. The accident and abandonment had stripped away pretenses and revealed authentic connections I might never have discovered otherwise. I never thought I'd say this. I confided to Rebecca as the party wound down. But in some ways, this experience has given me more than it took. She squeezed my hand in understanding. Sometimes we need to lose what we thought we wanted to find what we actually need. The wisdom of that statement would carry me through the final stages of physical recovery and the emotional reckoning that waited just around the corner. After exactly 1 month in New Zealand, my parents and Lily returned to Chicago. I learned of their arrival not through direct communication, but via a casual text from Mom. Back home. We'll stop by tomorrow to check on you. The message's tone suggested they expected to find me desperate for their attention, grateful for whatever scraps of time they deigned to offer. The Eleanor from before the accident might have accepted this dynamic, but that version of me no longer existed. I was in the middle of a physical therapy session with Amy when they arrived unannounced the following afternoon. The sound of keys in the lock, they still had my spare set, interrupted our work on knee flexion exercises. My parents entered with a confident entitlement of people who expected to be welcomed, shopping bags in hand, Lily trailing behind with a hesitant expression. Their shocked faces when they found not only me but also Amy, Rebecca, and Thomas gathered around the dining table told me everything about their expectations. They had anticipated finding me alone and struggling, not surrounded by support and engaged in active recovery. Who are all these people? Mom asked, not bothering to hide her confusion. Friends, I replied simply. The people who've been helping me recover. An awkward introduction followed, during which my parents attempted to assume the role of primary caregivers returning to duty. Rebecca exchanged a knowing glance with me before tactfully suggesting that she, Thomas, and Amy give us privacy for a family reunion. As they gathered their things, each gave me a reassuring touch, Amy's hand on my shoulder, Thomas's encouraging nod, Rebecca's whispered, "Call if you need us." Once they departed, the apartment felt charged with unspoken tension. Mom set down shopping bags labeled with New Zealand tourist shops and produced souvenirs with forced cheerfulness. "We brought you presents," she announced. A wool scarf, some local honey, and this cute kiwi bird stuffed toy. The disconnect between these trivial offerings and the magnitude of their abandonment was so vast it would have been comical if it weren't so painful. I accepted the items with polite thanks, but made no effort to fill the uncomfortable silence that followed. Dad eventually cleared his throat. "You look better than we expected. Your coworkers seem very involved." "They've been my lifeline," I stated plainly, along with my home health aide, physical therapist, support group, and Aunt Barbara. The mention of Barbara caused Mom's expression to stiffen. "Barbara? Why would you involve her in your personal matters? She reached out when she heard about my accident. Apparently, you hadn't mentioned it to family. This direct challenge to their narrative visibly unsettled them. Lily, who had remained silent, perched on the edge of the couch, her discomfort evident. Well, Mom continued, ignoring the implied criticism, we're back now, so you won't need to rely on outsiders anymore. We can take over from here. The presumption in her statement, that they could abandon me, then reclaim their role at their convenience, ignited something in me that had been building for weeks. With a calmness that surprised even me, I began the confrontation I had rehearsed countless times in my mind. I need to be very clear about something, I said, sitting straighter in my chair. You chose to leave when I needed you most. You prioritized a vacation over helping your injured daughter. You told me not to call you while you were happy, explicitly stating that my medical crisis would ruin your mood. Dad attempted to interrupt, but I held up my hand. Please let me finish. Those actions and words affected me deeply. They showed me exactly where I stand in your priorities. That knowledge can't be erased with souvenirs or belated offers of help. Mom's face flushed with indignation. We're your parents, Eleanor. You don't get to lecture us about priorities. We raised you, supported you through college. And I've been grateful for that support, I acknowledged. But parenthood doesn't end when a child turns 18. Relationships require reciprocity and presence during difficult times, not just convenient ones. You've always been so independent, Dad protested weakly. We thought you'd manage. Independent doesn't mean invulnerable, I countered. I needed help after a major accident, and you made a conscious choice to leave. That choice has consequences for our relationship moving forward. The conversation continued, with my parents cycling through defenses. They deserved the vacation. Lily needed celebration. They couldn't have known how serious the recovery would be. Each justification revealed more about their perspective than they perhaps intended. They genuinely couldn't see how their actions appeared to others or to me. Throughout the exchange, I maintained boundaries I would have previously abandoned in the face of their disapproval. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't allow them to deflect or minimize. I simply stated my truth and the conditions under which our relationship could continue. Moving forward, I need honesty and respect, I explained. I can't accept the previous dynamic where my needs were secondary to everyone else's convenience. I'm not cutting you out of my life, but I am changing the terms of our relationship. Mom's eyes narrowed. You sound ungrateful. After everything we've done for you. I'm grateful for the good things you've provided, I clarified. But gratitude doesn't require accepting harmful behavior. It's possible to appreciate past support while establishing healthier boundaries for the future. Lily, who had remained silent throughout this exchange, suddenly spoke up. Mom, Dad, Eleanor is right. Her voice trembled slightly, but she continued. What we did was wrong. I knew it was wrong when we left, and I felt terrible about it every day since. The shock on our parents' faces at this unexpected alliance was profound. Lily had never openly disagreed with them before, always following their lead to maintain peace. Her stand now, however small, represented a seismic shift in family dynamics. We abandoned her when she needed us, Lily continued, gaining confidence. No vacation was worth that. I should have stayed to help even if you two went. Mom turned to Lily with a look of betrayal. After we gave you that wonderful trip? This is how you repay us? By taking her side against your own parents. It's not about sides, Lily insisted. It's about recognizing when we've hurt someone we love. This unexpected support from my sister created space for a more nuanced conversation. While my parents initially reacted with defensiveness and anger, Lily's perspective gradually forced them to confront the reality of their actions from someone they couldn't easily dismiss. The discussion lasted hours, cycling through difficult emotions and hard truths. By evening, we had reached an uneasy truce. My parents didn't fully acknowledge the gravity of their abandonment, but they recognized that our relationship had fundamentally changed. They left with the understanding that rebuilding trust would be a long process initiated on my terms, not theirs. After they departed, Lily stayed behind. "Can I come back tomorrow?" she asked tentatively. "I'd like to actually help if you'll let me." This marked the beginning of a new, more honest relationship with my sister. Over the following weeks, she visited regularly, assisting with practical tasks and engaging in conversations that peeled back layers of our shared family history. She revealed her own struggles with our parents' conditional affection and the pressure of being the favorite child. "I always envied your independence," she confessed during one visit. "Mom and Dad kept me dependent because it made them feel needed. You broke free, and I think they resented that." 6 months after the accident, my recovery had progressed remarkably. I walked with only a slight limp, managed stairs carefully but independently, and had returned to the office part-time. My medical team expressed satisfaction with my healing, though occasional pain remained a reminder of the trauma my body had endured. My relationship with my parents evolved into something more distant but ultimately healthier. We maintained contact through occasional family dinners where conversation remained surface level but cordial. I enforced boundaries they grudgingly respected, and while they never fully acknowledged the harm of their abandonment, they adapted to the new normal of our limited interaction. With Lily, however, genuine healing occurred. She moved out of our parents' influence, renting an apartment closer to mine, and establishing her own career path without their direction. Our weekly sister dinners became cherished opportunities for authentic connection we had never experienced growing up. The community that formed during my recovery remained intact, evolving beyond crisis response into genuine friendship. Rebecca, Thomas, Jessica, and others who had stepped up in my darkest moments became chosen family, their presence a reminder that sometimes life's most painful detours lead to unexpected destinations worth finding. The most profound healing, however, occurred within me. The accident and subsequent abandonment forced a reckoning with patterns I had accepted throughout my life. The people-pleasing, the quest for parental approval, the belief that independence meant isolation, all were examined and ultimately discarded for healthier alternatives. 6 months to the day after my parents left for New Zealand, I walked with minimal assistance into an important client presentation. As I stood before the room of executives, briefly resting my hand on the podium for support, I felt the culmination of both physical and emotional recovery. The journey from that rainy night when my car spun out of control to this moment of professional confidence had transformed me in ways I never anticipated. The crash had broken more than my legs. It had shattered illusions about family, self-worth, and the meaning of strength. In their place grew a more authentic understanding. Family is defined by actions, not blood. Strength includes vulnerability. And sometimes, losing what you thought you needed opens the door to what you truly deserve. Has your family ever abandoned you when you needed them most? Or have you found that your chosen family stepped up when your blood relations let you down? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. Remember, sometimes life's biggest setbacks can lead to our greatest comebacks. Thank you for listening to my journey, and may you find the support you deserve in your own.